Well, pleasant good morning to everyone, all you sports fans, and welcome to the PR Man and the Coach Talking Ball podcast on the BallFather podcast presented by Sports Kita. I'm Reggie Roberts, your host, longtime NFL PR man for two NFL teams, Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Atlanta Falcons, and longtime NFL observer. And I'm joined by my co-host, who needs no introduction. His name is Mike Smith, former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, winningest coach in Falcons history. Good morning, Mike. How we doing, man?
I'm good, Reg. How you doing?
Great.
Good.
Lot to get to. Recapping NFL Week 4. A lot of news in the NFL, a lot of buzz in the NFL. So we'll kind of just get right into it. You know, at the beginning of the year, there's always the preseason magazines that are out. And as a former writer, I used to go by and buy them and come up with story ideas. But I don't think anybody's thought that what's taking place in the NFC East with regards to the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't think anybody's. I think there's a lot of surprise in that because I don't think anybody thought the Eagles after 4 weeks would be undefeated, but they are. And as great as the great Bill Parcells used to say, you are what your record says you are. So let's get right to it, Coach. The Eagles are 4-0. They're playing really good on offense. Jalen Hurts is playing really well. They've got two really good Pro Bowl receivers, and I know it's a real small sample size. It's only 4 games. But do you think that the Eagles, like the NFL, a lot of the experts are saying, are the most complete team in the NFL based on the fact that they're 4-0?
Well, they're off to a great start. There's no doubt. It's still early.
Yeah.
We're in the first quarter of the ball game, so to speak. As you know, we used to break it down.
Absolutely. Yeah.
First quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. They kind of messed it up going to 17 games, but they are the only undefeated team. Hats off to General Manager Howie Roseman. He went back to the old Andy Reid tree last year, brought on Nick Sirianni, 9-7 last year. They're off to a great start. Looking at who they beat, though, they beat the Lions, the Vikings, the Commodores, and the Jaguars. They haven't played the best teams in their division yet. Their division, as you mentioned, is tough. It's a big surprise that the Giants, the Cowboys, and the Philadelphia is playing so well, but they haven't played the toughest teams yet. They've got to play the Cowboys in the division twice. They got to play the Giants, and their schedule is a little backloaded. That's not to take anything away from them. They've done a great job in the turnover ratio. They're +8, and when you're +8 through 4 games, you're +2. You've enhanced your chances of winning. There's no doubt about that. And Jalen Hurts, the quarterback's playing lights out. He is really doing a great job. Miles Sanders is doing a good job running the football. They got a real deep receiver group, and A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and the tight end Goddard. And the thing that I didn't realize, their defense leads the league right now in sacks, and they're third in interceptions. So they're playing good ball.
That all those numbers that you talked about, those I can remember when we were together in Atlanta. We talk about, used to talk to our media a lot about, the turnover battle, and if you force a bunch of turnovers and you don't turn the football over, your percentages go up dramatically in winning games. I mean, what was that? I forget what the number was. We used to talk to our media a lot about that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're +2 in the turnover ratio, you're going to win between 75 and 80% of the time. And, that was kind of the rule of thumb back, 7-8 years ago. It's probably changed a little bit, but, directionally, you want to be +2. And if you're +2, you enhance your chances of winning.
They're doing a lot of really good things. Like you said, they're turning the ball over. Jalen's not turning the ball over. I heard someone say the other day talking about how, it's just a matter of time before he reverts back. He'll start throwing it to the other team, but that hadn't happened. I mean, he's getting really good protection. They're like you mentioned, they've got a really deep group. They've got a really deep group of receivers. So you're right. The schedule is backloaded, but we'll just have to just kind of wait and see how they do in the second month of the season, and as we get into the later months in November, December, see how they do.
Yeah, Reg, and when we talked about breaking it down into quarters. I don't think you can look at a season and you can't even talk about the schedule to your team being backloaded. You just got to go through and focus on first thing the next game. And then the second thing I think is you got to break it down at some point. And quarters worked great, great for us where we're looking about, hey, let's do it this quarter and see what happens.
Right. Okay. Staying in the NFCs, I was listening to the radio. I was in my car Sunday afternoon, and I was listening. There's a national sports radio commentator was talking to a national audience, and he said something that almost wrecked the car. He said he knew 3 weeks ago that Cooper Rush was going to go undefeated as soon as he got a chance to show the world what he could do right after Dak went down after week 1 against Tampa Bay. And I'm thinking, well, how did he know that? He's talking about how the guy was a good player in college, and he was, came from a really good coaching staff. But the bottom line is this: the Cowboys are 3-0 since he was a starter, since he replaced Dak. But Dak's been telling people, people who cover the league and people who are his friends, that he's going to come back this week, NFL Week 5, when the Cowboys get on the bird to head west to play the Rams out in SoFi. So, Mike, let me ask you, as a former coach, winningest coach in Falcons history, what's that like? The players in your ear, but you kind of want to defer to the medical staff. His hand may be better, he may not be better. Reports were that he still got some swelling in that hand. What do you do as a coach? When your star quarterback says he's ready to come back, but yet he may not be ready from a medical perspective. What do you do in that particular situation? And what do you think Coach McCarthy's going to do?
Well, all players want to play. They want to get out on the field and play, and you've got to rely on, on the medical experts in terms of what the specific injury is. That's first and foremost. You've got to take that all in. It's all good. You want your leader and the guy that's been the leader of your team for a number of years back out there on the field. But I tell you, Dallas is playing as good as any team in the NFL right now with Cooper Rush.
They are.
And it is a good problem to have. A lot of teams don't even have one quarterback, much less two. And Dak's one of the top players in the NFL, and he should be on the field as soon as possible. I know McCarthy, the fans, the owner, they all want to get Dak back out there, but they need to make sure that he is ready to go, and that one, he can, protect himself, and two, that he can be productive. But this is a tough decision. They're playing real well, but if the doctors say there's no risk for re-injury, I would certainly strongly consider getting Dak back out there. But you got to remember about this game coming up. The Rams, they got this dude that wears number 99.
Yeah, he ain't bad.
No, he's not too bad,
He ain't bad. No, he ain't bad.
He's a force to be reckoned with, and
Yeah.
you don't want to get your quarterback banged up again. But it's great for Dallas because they've now found that they do have a great backup that can win ball games in the National Football League.
Mike, it's interesting. It's first of all, how do you, as a coach, how do you have that conversation with your guy? You were really, really good. As a matter of fact, our media used to tell me sometimes you're really, really good at talking to the doctors and relying on the medical staff. How do you have that conversation in your office with a guy when when the medical staff says, it's kind of 50-50, you're playing good? What were those conversations like when you had to tell a player, hey, we're going to wait another week, we're going to sit you for another week? How did you do that? How did that go?
Well, you've got to be honest with the guys, and the doctors have final say.
Right.
The head coach doesn't have final say. The player doesn't have final say. That you've got to trust in the doctors, and they can give you the best information. Sometimes the information is not always coming from the team doctor. It may be the guy that actually did the procedure, and more in the NFL today, when a guy gets a knee, he's going to go see a specific doctor. If he has a shoulder, he's going to go see another doctor. So, you've got to rely on that. You've also got to take into consideration his agent, the player's agent, because the player's agent will have his opinion. There's so many people that are involved in the decision in everybody's mind, but really there's one person that has to make that decision to say, hey, he's ready to go, and that's the doctor. And the big thing that you want to do is you want to let the player know that, hey, we want you back, but we want you back when you're healthy and you're not going to be out there not being able to protect yourself, or you're going to have a potential of having a re-injury. And that's the thing that you want to make sure that it's okay. Sometimes it's better to be less aggressive, in my mind.
Yeah.
it's a long season
Sure.
for the Dallas Cowboys. We're in week 5 now,
Right.
and there's
12
a
more to
lot of
go.
games to play, and there is a guy right now named Cooper Rush that's playing really good football. So I
Yeah.
think that would be part of the decision making that you would go through as well. But it's great that your quarterback wants to get back out on the field.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
Reg.
The interesting thing about it, the other thing that I thought that was really interesting about it was, defensively they're playing better. They got a really good pass rush. Michael Parsons is all world. He's a really good player. And on the back end they got guys. They got the guy, the Diggs guy who's the corner or the safety. I forget what spot he plays.
Corner for him.
Plays corner. He's a really good player. And then here's the other thing. If I'd be thinking of it this way. You mentioned the aforementioned Aaron Donald. 2-time NFL Player of the Year, just came off a Super Bowl win. They're going to be pretty angry this upcoming week because they got kind of embarrassed on national TV last night. I'm not sure. I think I'd wait a week.
Yeah.
They got to wait a week.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see that, as they go through that decision-making process there in Dallas. And there'll be a lot of people giving their opinion, but really it comes down to the doctors and then Coach McCarthy and his staff.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the game that took place over in London over the weekend. I remember we played over in London, but this past weekend, I don't know if you got to see it. It was an amazing game. The Vikings and the Saints. It started out with the Saints kind of got after them a little bit, but the Vikings improved to 3-1. 28-25 win. Will Lutz kicked the 60-yard field goal late in the fourth quarter to tie it, and then the Vikings took the lead, and then Will Lutz had another chance to tie it late in the game with a 61-yard ball doinked twice off the goalpost. We played over in London when you were the head coach. We had a it was a great trip. We did a lot of community service work over there. We did a lot of work with the media. What's your opinion of those games, Coach? I mean, I know the league's trying to, globalize the game, and we played in, Mexico City, we've played in London and other places. What do you remember about our experience over there, and what do you remember, and what's your thoughts on playing in London?
Well, Reggie, personally, our week that we spent there, it was a long week. If you remember, we had an away game in Baltimore. Yeah. And we left from the East Coast, and went over there and spent the whole week. We had to adjust, our preparation.
Right.
It was almost like training camp again. Your routine changes, and people are still trying to figure it out. Sometimes they go there and spend the whole week. Sometimes they go in a day early.
Right.
Some people treat it just like how they do the West Coast trips, but the games abroad are here to stay in the National Football League.
Right.
We're globalizing the game. The fans in London, they were really into the game, and they're becoming more and more familiar with it. But the international games, they're not going away, man. You know that.
Yeah.
And one of the first steps, I think, to have more international games was us the league going to a 17-game schedule.
Right.
It wouldn't surprise me at some point down the road that every team has a neutral site game.
Wow.
So then instead of having a 9-8 split one year, and then the next year you go 8-9 home and away,
right,
every team potentially could play an international or a neutral site game to even up the competition throughout the season. But it's gonna happen. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if it's 5 years down the road, if it's 10 years down the road, and don't be surprised if the National Football League has franchises at some point in time around the world. I know that's in the plan.
It's in the works.
Plan for the National Football League.
Yeah.
And they say soccer's the international sport and the most watched. Football is going to be coming up pretty strong if they continue to try to globalize it. We play in Mexico now, so it's a great experience for the players when you're there for the game, but it's definitely something that there's going to be more, not less, in the future.
The league's got offices in Mexico City. They've got offices in Japan. There's offices in London. I think you're right. It is here to stay. I think what the key is trying to figure out, figuring out the travel back and forth. I don't think anybody's quite figured that part of it out, and that's the difficult part because going back and forth. I mean, that's hard. They haven't quite figured that out, but I think their work. They may even commission a study and have you on the committee to help you have you help them figure it out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes into effect in terms of, right now, they're playing, I think, 4 games this year, and they're doing it in 2 different stadiums. And I believe we also have a game in Mexico.
Right.
And it's just going to continue to expand. Some people have talked about the Jacksonville Jaguars,
moving over there.
Yeah, moving over there.
Permanently. Yeah.
There's all types of talk going on. But there's not been a whole lot of action, but I know that they're studying it extremely closely on how this thing can work, where they can be worldwide.
Just to sort of switch over to the AFC a little bit, things are a little noisy in Pittsburgh. With the Steelers off to another slow start, the end of the season, lots of question marks. Biggest being who was going to succeed. Ben Roethlisberger is the quarterback. Trubisky won the job in training camp, but he's I probably shouldn't say this, but his whole career, I've always thought he's just been sort of a pedestrian quarterback and not been very good. And he obviously wasn't very good on Sunday. He got benched. The Steelers go and put in the guy who sort of was a star at the University of Pittsburgh, played in that stadium. Guy comes in, scores 2 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, become the first rookie quarterback in his first start to score 2 rushing touchdowns. Fans were really familiar with him since he played in the stadium. And then, he does what a rookie quarterback does. He threw the ball to the other guys and they lost. So, there's a lot of noise in Pittsburgh and it's I think Mike Tomlin's equipped to have it. But let me ask you, Coach. You coached a long time. You've been in this game a long time. What do you think Mike does this weekend? Having to travel to Orchard Park, where even if you got Roethlisberger, that's one of the toughest places to play in the league with that team as well as they're playing right now. How do you go about that solving that riddle?
Well, let's just start at the beginning. This is the post-Ben era, right? And this should be expected.
Okay.
This is a quarterback that's been there forever, longer than Coach Tomlin's been there.
Right.
I think 18 years. And this should be expected. It was a little interesting that there was a battle in the preseason that was won by obviously Trubisky. But after this 1-3 start, Coach Tomlin's made the decision, according to reports that I think happened yesterday. I don't think it's come out of Coach Tomlin's mouth, but according to reports yesterday, they're going to start Kenny Pickett, and the Kenny Pickett will be the starting quarterback. And there's lots of ways you can bring a quarterback along. We felt like Matt Ryan would give us the best chance. So that's why Matt Ryan started in game 1 of his rookie seasons. Yep. Other coaches have approached it a little bit differently. It looked like there was a competition. It sounded like in Pittsburgh, and obviously it was won by Mitch because he started the first part of the season. But it's a new challenge for Coach Tomlin. He's not had to deal with this before because he's had the same quarterback his whole entire career. I'll say this, Reggie, and you know it. You've heard me say it a bunch, buddy. This is a quarterback-driven league.
Yeah.
You got to have one to be in the conversation at the end of the season. If you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance.
Right.
And they threw the rookie in there in the second half, and I think he was like 10 for 13, 10 for 13, 120 yards. But he did throw it to the other color jerseys 3 times. But if he thought that was a tough deal, wait till he sees what's coming up the next 4 games. My goodness. You mentioned Buffalo, who they're playing about as good as anybody in the league. But then they got Tampa Bay, Miami, and Philadelphia. So he's going to get a good look at some good NFL teams over the next month.
Baptism by fire. I mean that's as tough as it gets.
Yeah, it sure does. So
that's as tough as it gets.
But Mike Tomlin is one of the best coaches in the NFL, and he'll have his team prepared this week.
Yep.
Hey, the fans loved it. I saw and heard
Oh, the ovation. It was
ovation when he came
unbelievable.
in there. And even though he was 10 for 13 and 120 yards, but he did throw the 3 interceptions. They were all excited about moving forward with Kenny Pickett as the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if you got a quarterback in this league, he's a first round pick. They're expecting him to do much better than that as he gets a little bit more experience under his wings.
It's interesting. He was a, I don't know. I don't want to say he was a great quarterback, but he was a serviceable. He was really good at. He was really good. He was obviously good enough to be selected #1 overall. I'm sorry, in the first round, 20th overall by the Steelers. He's tough. He's kind of got a little moxie to him. You know, what do you do in that case, Mike, with a young quarterback? You obviously there's other pieces around him to help him. You kind of, you can rely on your running game, rely on your defense. Is that what you think probably happens with regards? You won't ask him to do everything, but let him kind of manage the game until he kind of gets a little better. Is that you think the course of action they're going to chart for him?
That's usually standing operating procedure with the rookie quarterback. You don't want to put him in a situation that every week he's got to go out there and win the ball game.
Right.
You want him to go out there and not lose the ball game by throwing it 3 times to the other team, not getting into the right checks and everything. So I'm sure it'll be a simpler or a smaller package.
Right.
And rely on the running game. Pittsburgh has always had a good running
Absolutely.
game. Let's get out there and run the football.
Yeah.
Don't put him in situations where he's going to be facing exotic blitzes and that kind of stuff. Make sure you've got him protected up, and they'll do that in Pittsburgh. Mike and his staff is one of the best staffs over the last 15 years in the NFL. So he'll have a plan, and hopefully the game will be close, and they'll be able to have a chance to win it in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want to go out there and the offensive coordinator wants to go out and score every time they have the ball, but that's not necessarily the best way to approach it. I know when we approached it with Michael Turner, we wanted Michael Turner to give Matt a little relief so that Matt Ryan didn't have to go out there and win the game. We just didn't want him to go out there and, like we said earlier, give it to the other team. Right. And I think Pickett, from what I understand, he's got a great skill set to be a quarterback in the National Football League. And if they drafted right, they probably are going to have him a guy that's going to be around for 10, 12, 14 years.
Yeah. I go back to our formula back in 2008 when you were there in Atlanta. I mean, we kind of got it right. I mean, Coach, I got to be honest with you, man. I'm in a foul mood. Okay, I'm in a foul mood, and the reason I'm in a foul mood, as you're aware, I'm a Louisiana native. Okay, I'm a Louisiana guy through and through. I love my home state. I love the food in my native Louisiana. Matter of fact, I'm in my native Louisiana right now, taking care of some other business. And like most folks from the Bayou State, we ride or die with our Saints, whether we're winning or we're losing, wearing bags over our heads. I ride with my Saints, and things aren't going real well in the Big Easy right now. But I still think there's time because, like you mentioned earlier, we're only in the first quarter of the season. Just a quick review. The Saints are they're playing. They're not playing quite well on either side of the ball. They're playing good enough to win, but they're giving up a lot of plays, on defense. Having coached in the NFC South against the Saints as much as you did, I think 14 times, both home and away. We were in Atlanta. You're very familiar with the organization. So, just a quick observation as a guy who knows football and guys who coached and taught football. What do you think's going on in New Orleans?
Well, they're going through what I call the post Sean Payton and Drew Brees era. They had it pretty good.
Yeah, they did.
Those two guys were at the head of the whole entire organization, not just the football team. And they've moved on. One's been gone 2 years, one's been gone 1. And I think what they need to do right now is to kind of focus on the process. Okay. To me, I wouldn't worry too much about wins and losses. They need to focus on the process. And there's a couple things that stand out to me through the first 4 games with the Saints. And the first is that they're averaging 8.25 penalties per game.
Oh, that'll get you beat.
That'll get you beat.
Every
Man.
week in, week out, that'll get you beat.
And those penalties usually come at the most unopportune times when you're having a lot of them. They got to feel good about the two quarterbacks that they've got. They both have experience, and they both started and won a lot of games in the NFL. So they got to feel good about that.
Right.
They are -7 in the turnover ratio. -7. And it's very, very, we talked about it earlier, man. You can't win if you're turning the ball over. And the other thing that's hit them right now, and injuries can't be used as an excuse, but they've had the injury bug going on pretty good there through the first 4 games. 4 of their top players on offense were inactive. Jameis Winston, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, and then their offensive tackle, Andres Pete. So, they got to go through that. But again, I think it's growing pains, but I think you got to focus not on the results. You got to focus on the process. And that's one is winning that turnover battle, and don't have penalties that get you off schedule on offense or give up big chunks on defense. And I've noticed here a lot, Reggie, and it become more and more. They let the DBs and the wide receivers play a little more than they used to.
They used to. No question.
Going on.
Right.
And those are the discussions now that across the nation, everybody's talking about. That wasn't a penalty. This was a penalty.
Right.
I don't know what pass interference is anymore, to be quite.
I don't think anybody knows.
I think they coach it on both the offensive and the defensive side of the ball, and they're just gonna let it go and let the officials decide. And it's tough because there's not a whole lot of consistency from week to week.
Mike, let me ask you this. You talked about the penalties. We were one of the least penalized teams in the NFL the entire time you were there. Is that something that's coached during training camp, something that's worked on during OTAs? I mean, how do you get a team to stop committing penalties? I mean, is that how do you emphasize? How does a coaching staff go about emphasizing that?
Well, it was a big emphasis for us, Reggie, and I think you remember this. We would on Monday we talked. Excuse me, let me go back. So we talked that we were going to be one of the best teams in terms of penalties. We coached it all the time. Even if we didn't have officials out at practice, if there was a penalty, we were bringing it up, and we were not only bringing it up in our individual meetings, we were bringing it up in team meetings. But we kept track, and every penalty that was called, not necessarily enforced, but every penalty that was called on our Monday meeting on a Sunday game,
remember that
we would put the penalty board up, and everybody got to see who had penalties. Right. And we made it an emphasis, and we talked about how important it was to be the least penalized team in the league. And I believe we set a record for the least amount of penalties in one of our seasons. I can't remember what season it was.
I think it was 2012, the year we went to the championship game. I think it was 2012.
Yeah. So you can coach it by having officials out there all the time, but it also needs to be talked about in the meetings. And there's nothing like peer pressure. You look it up there, and not only did we put the penalties up, we talked about how it affected the game.
Right.
And what the true result was. It just wasn't a 5-yard penalty. It just wasn't a 27-yard pass interference that led the points.
Right.
In the ball game. So that is the things that you've got to do. It's all part of the process.
So in other words, so if you're sitting in a meeting room, and the coach, or whether it be you or special teams coordinator Keith Armstrong or whoever it was, they'd point out not only the penalty, but what the penalty led to. The peer pressure in that room is great, because you don't want to be the guy that's being called out in the room that committed the penalty that hurt your team. Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely. There's nothing like peer pressure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And guys want to please. They want to please the coaches. They want to please the rest of the guys in the room. And, and I would point it out. Here was our penalties. And I'd go through each one of them and talk about, here was the 4 penalties that we had. And it happened at this point in the game. And if I had to use video to make it even more powerful and say, look at this, guys, this is what happened. And, you want us to have a smart football team that is going to be, the least penalized. And there are some other coaches that go in and have a different philosophy on it, especially now in the back end play and the pass plays. I mean, the hand fighting that's going on, they're both offense and defense, or, they're coaching it and teaching it. Yeah. And unfortunately, that puts it in the hands of the officials, and it's not always consistent from week to week. As we know, consistency is one of the things that you want to have in a football game, but it doesn't happen because there's so many moving parts and so many people involved.
Mike, I think correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you used to sort of keep up with the different officiating crews with regards to which one's called a bunch of penalties, which one's called holding penalties and pass. I think am I on base with that?
Yes, you are, Reg. We would have on our Friday meetings, we would have our scouting report on the officials. And we were, I think most teams are doing it now, but we started that in 2008. We would talk about each official just like we would talk about each player,
right,
on the crew, and where statistically they landed, right, compared to the rest of the crew. We'd look at their the season that we were in. We also went back to the year before. We wanted to use as much data as we could so we could tell the guy, hey, this guy leads the league in calling offensive holding in the center guard position.
Right.
And it gave us, I felt, an advantage, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for an advantage. And our guys would, some of the guys would take it to an extreme and say, hey, I know you're number 2 and calling PIs, talk to the back judge before the game, said, hey, let's keep that up. The receiver would be telling them, Roddy White or Harry Douglas or Tony Gonzalez would, they get a little
keep that up. Get a little advantage. Get a little advantage. Yeah, that's interesting. Just to kind of keep going here, you're on the PR Man and Coach Talking Ball on BallFather podcast presented by Sportskeeda with Reggie Robertson, my co-host Mike Smith, winningest coach in Falcons history. Coach, anybody who watches the game is very, very concerned and cognizant with player health and safety. And if you watch the game on Thursday, there's some things that went on there Thursday night that sort of kind of were a little bit appalling. Just to recap for those who may not didn't see it. The Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, suffered a concussion in the game, was briefly hospitalized. It marked the second consecutive week that Tua's head hit the ground very, very hard, and it sparked a strong reaction from the Players Association. Players Association initiated their own investigation, and basically after that review, the NFL's concussion protocol. They basically got rid of and fired the consultant, the neurotrauma consultant, for some mistakes they viewed that he made. Coach, you coached a long time in the league, and you've done a lot of work with the competition committee and various committees with the league. Talk a little bit about with regards to players and the concussion rules and the rules that are in place now. How did you handle that, especially when a guy got hit, wanted to go back into the game, and talk about what you saw Thursday night and what concerns you about what you saw on Thursday?
Well, that was a scary situation. There's no doubt about it. And I mean, it has been talked about all weekend long.
Sure.
By all the talking heads. And it is this very serious subject. Players' safety, players' health is at the forefront now in terms of what the National Football League wants to provide for the players. They've made so many rule changes. The equipment is so much better now. We definitely have an issue, though. There's no doubt about it. That should not have happened with the protocols that are supposed to be in place the way that I understand it. So
Correct.
we need to get together as a league and talk with the players and talk with the unions and make sure that we have the best protocols in place and that they are abided by. And I don't know that they were all done correctly and have been done correctly over the last couple of weeks. It's become very apparent. And, this is a very, very tough discussion to have because, guys, you got to realize this. The majority of the players, they want to be on the field no matter what.
Right.
And sometimes they don't, they are not forthcoming with what's going on. And we need to change that. They don't want to let their teammates down. They feel like they're letting their teammates down if they're not out on the field. Well, neurological health is probably the most important thing going on right now in the National Football League. We need to make sure that our players are as safe as they can be. And when in doubt, you should be out. And whether it's a coach seeing it, whether it's a player seeing it, because you can't always take the word of the player because they'll tell you I'm fine. But there are signs, Reg, it. I mean, we've seen enough football games and watched enough tape. I mean, when it happens, you go, boy, that's not good.
No.
I'll watch it, and I'll see it before a replay.
Right.
Or you're standing on the sideline going, oh, he's been concussed. And when they are concussed, or there's even an inkling that we think that he may be concussed, we need to get him off the field.
Right.
And they need to come up with a new protocol that makes sure that we don't have the same thing 2 weeks from now.
Right. I think that's going to happen. I think, but let's go back to the Buffalo game, September 25th, when he got hurt in their own end zone towards, I guess they were backed up near their end zone, and he's kind of walking and he kind of stumbles. I mean, at that point, when he does that,
you're out.
You're out. You're out.
Right,
you got to be out. You got to be out. He's stumbling, he's going. I mean, at that point, the official, the head official should have the latitude and the power to just stop the game and pull the guy out. I mean, I don't know if you want to put it all on the official. I mean, maybe that's too hard to do.
Yeah, well, Reggie, there's an observer upstairs that his only job, the way I understand it, is to do that. Buzz down when he sees something that looks, if it looks like a concussion, it smells like a concussion. It doesn't matter what the player says. Right. We need to proceed that it was a neurological issue, not necessarily quote a concussion, but it was a neurological issue. I wouldn't put a player back out, even if he told me that he wanted to go back out, if I saw something that looked and smelled like a neurological issue. Right. You can't do that. But the problem is, Reg, the majority of the players, they aren't always going to be forthcoming, and we need to change that as well and let players know how important it is for them to understand about their neurological path later in life, because it is tough. And we've done a lot. The league does so many things in terms of testing. The protocols that are in place need to be gone through, and I don't think that that's happened here in the last few weeks, and that's one of the reasons why it's a big discussion. I mean, you turn on the TV last week, it doesn't matter if it was ESPN, NFL Network,
CNN,
everybody was talking about
CNN, MSNBC, everybody was talking about it. And the other part is, the part that this is kind of an ugly underbelly of it, but it's true. I mean, a lot of times, especially late in the year, there's incentives, there's stuff in contracts, there's incentives, there's money involved. If this guy has so many snaps, he gets this much. If he has this many touchdowns, I mean, that's involved too. I mean, I know people don't like to hear that, but that's part of the discussion too. But that was such an egregious thing on September 25th of how he was stumbling. The fact that he even got to play, and let's not even talk about the short week. I mean, that happened Sunday, and then 5 days later he's back out there. I mean, that to me was the most egregious part, that the guy played five days after he was stumbling around and had lost to Buffalo. So that to me was,
Well,
I think you're right.
It was a systematic failure,
Correct,
without a doubt. And
yeah,
when those things happen, they need to take a good hard look at it and do it quickly, because we're going to be playing games on Thursday night and Sunday,
right,
and Monday this week. And
right, yeah,
if we don't have it, I would hate to see another situation like that happen.
yeah.
Not just for the league, but for the actual player. We
The
need to
actual player, yeah,
protect the player. Like I said, the majority of them, they want to be out there on the field. They don't want to let their teammates down, or they might have other things that drive them to say, hey, I need to be out on
sure,
the field.
yeah, yeah,
And they don't necessarily make the best decisions. And that's when the medical people and, of course, the coaches can step in and do it as well.
right,
If I saw a player that was woozy, I would make sure that he wasn't going to go back into the ball game.
yeah,
If he showed some type of neurological issues going on out there on the field.
right, right. Just to finish up on the podcast here, just with the Coach Smith, you know, I think everybody's kind of surprised. I can remember we're talking a little bit now about Seattle and what's going on with Geno Smith. I mean, I can remember when Geno Smith was in the league, and he kind of was just always kind of when he was drafted by the Bengals, kind of a pedestrian guy, not a guy that had a whole lot of success. And all of a sudden now you look at him, and Pete Carroll was gushing about him like he was Joe Namath the other day. And but you look at what he's done. I mean, you look at how he played over the weekend when they beat probably a not so good Detroit team, but he did throw for 300 yards, and he let them down there. Coach, what do you think about how Geno's playing? And can you remember an example of a guy that you've coached, whether it be on offense or defense, that kind of struggled a little bit and then kind of came on later in his career? Can you think of an example of a guy like that you've coached?
Well, example doesn't come to my mind, but it happens. And Geno started as he was a starting quarterback his first 2 years in the league.
Right.
I think it was with the Jets, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right. It was the Jets. Correct.
It was with the Jets, and they weren't successful. He went on and he's bounced around and been at five or six teams. Whatever age he is, and I don't know what age he is. If he's 29 or 28, he's a young 29. His body, young 28, right. Because he hasn't had a whole lot of opportunities to actually play in a game, but he's playing well. And Coach Pete Carroll, he's got good reason to be gushing, because he is playing well.
Yeah,
he's giving them opportunities to win. They lit the scoreboard up.
Yeah, they did.
This past week. But that's a great story, and you like to see and hear about those stories.
Yeah.
About a guy being so competitive and not giving up and keep pressing on. Yeah. And he's got to be a great teammate as well to last that long and to bounce around. He must be a super teammate. And that's it's a tough position to be in, is the backup quarterback in the National Football League for so long. Now he's the starter, and he's showing that he has the talent, both the physical and mental talent, to be a very successful and productive quarterback in the National Football League. I'm very happy for him personally, and it's great. Hey, it's great for Seattle post Russell Wilson to have someone coming in and playing well.
Yeah, I'm happy for him too. He every time you looked up, and I was doing a couple of things on Sunday. I was watching, but every time you look up, there was an update, and there was him throwing another touchdown pass. It was really, really cool and good to see him, and good for him. Well, listen, Coach, that's all I got today. We'll check in with you, and a couple of later this week, and we'll do this again. Get together and get on the podcast and kind of talk about what's going on in the league. It'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend when the Steelers go out to when the Steelers go up to New York, and it'll all be interesting to see when the Rams how the Rams play. There'll always be something great about this league, because every week it's like a soap opera. It unfolds, and there's something new, and there's something we haven't talked about. Something's brewing out there that we don't know about yet, but it'll be interesting to talk about. And we'll be back next week with version 3 of the BallFather podcast with Coach Smith.